If you think anonymity keeps you safe, you're wrong. This is what happens when someone recognizes you from a life you thought was buried, and it only takes one message to destroy everything. I used to believe I had separated my life cleanly. Not perfectly, but enough. It wasn't always rosy, but we got along. My family trusted me. We had our routines, our dinners, our small jokes that only make sense when you've known someone your whole life. I showed up. I listened. I smiled when I was supposed to. From the outside, everything looked normal. What they didn't know was that I had built a second world that never touched the first. Or at least that's what I told myself. Anonymity felt like control. It felt like breathing in a room where no one could see you. No history, no expectations, no childhood version of yourself following you around. I chose it carefully. I never showed my face. I never used my real name. I watched details the way paranoid people do. Reflections, shadows, angles. I thought I was being smart. At night, I'd sit on the edge of my bed with my phone glowing in my hands, the rest of the room dark and quiet. The house would settle around me, pipes ticking, the faint hum of the fridge down the hall. Sometimes my legs felt heavy, like they didn't belong to me anymore, like I'd been sitting there for hours even when it had only been minutes. I'd tell myself to stand up, to put the phone down, but my fingers would tighten around it instead. It wasn't excitement, it was focus. A narrow kind of calm. During the day, I was someone else. I answered messages from my mom while waiting in line at the grocery store. I talked to my sister about work while stirring coffee that had already gone cold. I listened, nodded, laughed at the right moments. My body did everything it was supposed to do, even when my mind felt slightly delayed, like it was always half a second behind. The first crack didn't feel dramatic, it felt off. I was standing in my kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, scrolling without really reading. Morning light came through the window at an angle that made dust visible in the air. I remember rubbing my thumb against the side of my phone case, over and over, the way I do when I'm thinking without realizing it. There was a new message. That alone wasn't unusual, but something about it slowed my breathing. I didn't answer right away. That was my first instinct. Freeze. Don't feed it, don't confirm anything, just breathe and let it pass like a bad dream. But my body didn't cooperate. I kept checking my phone like an addict checks a locked door. Every time the screen lit up, my shoulders jumped. My jaw stayed clenched so long my teeth started to ache. I tried to drink water and it tasted like metal. I told myself to do something normal, so I showered. Hot water, steam on the mirror, the sound of the fan pulling damp air out of the room. I stood under the spray and tried to slow my breathing, but my chest stayed tight, like a strap was pulled around my ribs. When I closed my eyes, I saw the message again. I opened them fast, water dripping off my eyelashes, and stared at the tile pattern on the wall until it stopped moving. When I got out, my hands were trembling as I wrapped a towel around myself. I picked up my phone with wet fingers and almost dropped it. The screen was dark. No new notifications. For a few minutes, I felt stupid. Dramatic? Like I'd invented a threat out of nothing? Then it buzzed again. I didn't even unlock it at first. I just held it, feeling the vibration fade in my palm, as if the phone was a living thing with a heartbeat. My stomach tightened. I sat down on the edge of the bed because my knees felt loose, unreliable. I unlocked it. There was another message. Still calm. Still not explicit. Still not a threat in the normal sense. It was a memory. Something about a place I hadn't thought about in years. A street, a bus stop, a smell. The kind of detail you don't tell anyone, because it's not interesting, it's just yours. My throat went dry again. I pressed my tongue to the back of my teeth and tried to swallow. I could feel sweat starting under my arms, even though the room was cool. I stared at the message, and my mind did this awful thing where it tried to solve it like a puzzle. Who would know that? Who would remember that? The answer came before I was ready. Someone from my childhood, not someone I was close to, not a friend, not someone I kept in touch with. Worse than that, someone who remembered me as a kid. That kind of recognition feels different. It's not flattering, it's invasive. It's like someone has walked into the private room in your head where you keep the version of yourself you don't show anyone anymore. I set the phone down and stood up, pacing in my bedroom with bare feet on the carpet. I could feel my pulse in my wrists. I rubbed my palms on my thighs like I could wipe the fear off. I told myself, okay, maybe they're bluffing, maybe they're fishing, maybe they have a guess and they're hoping I'll panic and confirm it. So I did what I always do when I'm afraid. I tried to control it with research. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, the same spot where the first message hit me. I pulled the chair in. I plugged the laptop in, even though it was already charged. I needed the sense of doing something right. I checked every privacy setting again. I checked the content again. I zoomed in on images until the pixels blurred, scanning for reflections, a window, a picture frame, anything that could give a clue. My eyes started to burn from staring. I leaned back and pressed my fingers into my eyelids, hard enough to see that little sparks. Nothing obvious, son. That's the thing about paranoia. When it starts, it doesn't need proof to grow. It just needs possibility. I started thinking about my past like it was a list of vulnerabilities. Old school, old neighborhood, old jobs. People who might recognize my voice, my hands, the shape of my shoulders, the way I tilt my head. I remembered a teacher who once told me I had a distinctive laugh. I remembered a woman at my first job who said I looked familiar, and I'd laughed it off. Now those memories didn't feel harmless. They felt like warnings I ignored. By lunchtime, I hadn't eaten. I tried, but my stomach kept tightening like a fist. I made toast anyway, just to pretend. The bread popped up and the sound made me flinch. I stood there holding the knife, staring at it, not moving until the smell of burnt edges snapped me out of it. Another notification. This time it wasn't a memory. It was proof. A photo. Not of me now. Not from the internet. A photo from the past. It wasn't even a good picture. It looked like it had been taken on an old phone, slightly grainy, bad lighting. A kid standing near a chain-link fence, half squinting in sunlight. A messy ponytail. A backpack too big for her shoulders. Me. My breath caught so sharply it felt like choking. My hands went cold. The phone felt heavier, like it had doubled in weight. I sat down hard in the chair, so fast the legs scraped the floor. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I could feel each beat in my ears. There are different kinds of fear. There's the fear of being judged, and then there's the fear of being known. This was the second kind. I stared at that picture, and it felt like I was looking at a ghost. Not because I didn't recognize myself, but because I did. I remembered that exact day, the way my shoes had felt too tight, the way I had been late, the way I'd been trying not to cry because someone had said something cruel and I didn't want to give them the satisfaction. I hadn't thought about that in years. I couldn't breathe normally. I put the phone down and pressed both hands against the table, trying to steady myself. My fingers were numb. I tried to flex them, and they didn't feel real. It was like my hands belonged to someone else. Only the next message came right after, like they were watching me in real time. It said something that made my stomach drop. A nickname. Not the one my family used. Not the one friends used. A childish nickname from that era. One I hated. One I hadn't heard since middle school. My skin prickled. Goosebumps ran up my arms. I looked around my kitchen as if someone could be standing there with me, even though I was alone. I walked to the front door again and checked the lock, then the window latch, then the back door. I knew it was irrational, but my body needed a ritual. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up, then immediately regretted it, like touching a hot stove. The message wasn't obscene. It wasn't even aggressive. It was polite. It asked if I remembered them. That was worse, because politeness means patience. It means someone who's not panicking, someone who's in control. I typed, then erased. Typed again. My thumbs were clumsy, shaking. I wanted to say, leave me alone. I wanted to say, who are you? I wanted to say, you're wrong. But every option felt like a trap. If I answered, I confirmed it was me. If I didn't answer, I let them set the pace. I stared at the typing box until my eyes watered. Then I put the phone down again and walked into my bedroom. like distance could protect me. That's when the psychological part really started. The part that doesn't look like a crisis from the outside. I went through the rest of the day moving slowly, like my limbs were filled with sand. I kept losing track of what I was doing. I would open the fridge and just stare into it. I would wash a plate and realize I'd been holding it under running water for a full minute without moving. My body was there. My mind was stuck in that message thread. That night my mom called. Her name lit up on my screen. My stomach turned. I felt an irrational flash of anger at her for existing, for pulling me back into the life that could now shatter. I answered anyway. I tried to sound normal. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the slight strain in it, like a tight rope being pulled. She talked about something simple, something stupid. A neighbor's dog, a recipe, weekend plans. I made the right noises at the right times, but my hand was gripping the edge of the counter so hard my fingers hurt. My throat felt tight, like words had to squeeze through a narrow opening. When I hung up, I realized my shirt was damp at the back from sweat. I stood in my kitchen in the dark, phone still in my hand, and the thought hit me like a punch. If this person had my childhood photo, then they had access to my past. And if they had access to my past, it wasn't just me at risk. It was my family's peace, their trust, their normal dinners and jokes and routines. I felt sick. I walked to the bathroom and leaned over the sink, staring at my own face in the mirror. My eyes looked glassy, like I was half asleep. I turned on the faucet just to have sound. The water ran and ran. I didn't recognize myself, not because I looked different, because I felt split. There was the version of me my family knew, and there was the version of me online, and now there was a third version. The terrified kid in that photo. And all three were suddenly in the same room. The next day was worse, because now I knew it wasn't a bluff. I tried to go to work like nothing was happening. I took a shower, got dressed, tied my hair back, my hands moved on autopilot, but my stomach stayed hollow and tight, like it had forgotten how to relax. On the train, I kept my phone face down on my lap like it was dangerous. Every time it buzzed, I felt my heartbeat spike. My palms were sweaty. I wiped them on my jeans, then immediately regretted it, like I was leaving evidence. I got off at my stop and walked too fast, almost tripping on the curb. The air outside was cold and sharp. It didn't help. It just made my breathing shallow. At my desk, I tried to focus on emails and numbers and normal tasks, but the words blurred. I kept rereading the same sentence, not understanding it. My mind kept drifting to the question that had become a constant buzz behind everything. What do they want? At lunch, I couldn't eat. I took a sandwich out of my bag and just stared at it. My coworker asked if I was okay. I forced a smile and said I hadn't slept. It was half true. By mid-afternoon, another message came. This one finally shifted from recognition to pressure. It didn't say, "I'm going to expose you." It said something softer, something manipulative. Something like, they could keep this between us if I was nice. I felt my face go hot. My hands shook so badly I had to set the phone down on the desk. My breath turned shallow and fast. I pressed my feet flat on the floor, trying to anchor myself, but the room still felt unreal. I went to the restroom and locked myself in a stall. The tile was cold under my fingers as I leaned my forehead against the wall. My chest felt like it couldn't fully expand. I swallowed and tasted bile. I sat down on the closed toilet lid and stared at the floor, willing the panic to stop. It didn't, because the message wasn't just a threat. It was a door opening, a door into a pattern. I knew what came next. Demands that get bigger. Pressure that escalates. A person who doesn't feel guilt because they've already decided you're less human than they are. And the most terrifying part was this. They weren't a stranger from the internet. They were someone who already had a version of me in their head. A child version. Someone they could rewrite, twist, use. Oh, I walked back to my desk on legs that felt weak. My fingers were numb as I packed my bag. I told my boss I felt sick. It wasn't a lie. My body felt poisoned. Outside the sky was gray and low. The city looked the same as it always did, but everything felt too loud. Cars, footsteps, voices. My skin felt too thin for all of it. On the train home, my phone stayed silent for a while. That silence wasn't relief, it was suspense. When I finally got home, I didn't turn on any lights. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and the clink echoed too loudly. I stood in the hallway, breathing, listening to the quiet. Then my phone buzzed again. One more message, a single sentence that made my stomach drop further than I thought possible. It mentioned my family, not by name, by relationship. Something like, "My mom must be proud." My vision went blurry at the edges. I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway because my legs stopped holding me up. The carpet felt rough under my palms. My whole body started shaking, deeper this time, like it was coming from inside my bones. I wasn't just scared of being recognized anymore. I was scared of being reached. Like this person could stretch their hand through my life and touch the people I loved. That's when I realized I was already losing control. Not publicly, not yet, but privately inside my own head. Something was breaking into pieces. And I didn't know how to put it back together. It wasn't flirtatious, it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't even curious, it was calm, almost gentle. I read it once, then again, my eyes moving, but my brain not fully catching up. My chest tightened like I'd inhaled too sharply. I sat down at the kitchen table because standing suddenly felt like too much effort. The chair scraped softly against the floor, louder than it should have been in the quiet room. The message didn't say my name. It didn't mention anything explicit. It mentioned something small, something unnecessary, a detail that didn't belong there. I felt heat rise into my face, then drain away just as fast, leaving me cold. My hands started to shake, not violently, just enough that I noticed. I pressed my palms flat against the table, feeling the grain of the wood under my skin, grounding myself like that would help. I told myself I was overreacting. People guess things. People get lucky. But my body didn't believe that. My mouth went dry. I swallowed and felt it stick. I stared at the message so long that the screen dimmed, then lit up again when I touched it, like it was breathing with me, or against me. Another message came in. Shorter this time, more specific. Something from my childhood, something harmless. Something no stranger should know. My heart started pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Each beat felt separate, heavy, like it had weight. I stood up too fast, and the room tilted slightly. I had to grab the back of the chair to steady myself, my fingers gripping the wood until my knuckles hurt. I walked to the window without knowing why. I looked out at the street, at people passing by with grocery bags and headphones and lives that weren't collapsing in real time. Everything outside looked normal, too normal. Inside something had shifted. The fear wasn't loud yet. It was quiet, precise. The kind that doesn't scream, the kind that waits. I checked the locks on the door even though I knew they were fine. I picked up my phone again, then put it down, then picked it up, my movements small and repetitive. My thoughts started circling the same question, over and over, faster each time. How do they know me? Not who they were. Not what they wanted. Just that. How? Because if they knew that, then they knew where I came from. And if they knew where I came from, then everything I'd built on anonymity was already cracking, even if no one else could see it yet. I sat back down and stared at the floor, my phone resting face down on the table like it might burn me if I touched it again. My shoulders felt tight, pulled inward, like my body was trying to make itself smaller. I hadn't been exposed, not officially, not publicly, but something had reached backward through time and grabbed me by the wrist. And I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach sink, that this wasn't going to end with just one message. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to every small sound in the apartment like it might be a signal. The refrigerator clicked on and off. A car passed outside. Somewhere in the building, someone flushed a toilet. Each noise made my muscles tense, then slowly to release, then tense again. My phone lay on the nightstand, face down, close enough that I could reach it without moving. I kept one hand on the mattress, fingers curled into the sheet, like I needed to anchor myself to something solid. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath no matter how deep I tried to inhale. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo again, The fence, the backpack, that version of me who had no idea what was waiting years later. At some point my legs started aching from holding so much tension. I rolled onto my side and pulled my knees up, a position I hadn't slept in since I was a kid. My mouth was dry. I swallowed and felt my throat scrape. The phone didn't buzz. That was almost worse. By morning, my head felt thick and heavy, like it was packed with wet cotton. When I stood up, I felt dizzy and had to put a hand against the wall to steady myself. In the bathroom mirror, my face looked pale and slightly swollen around the eyes. I turned the tap on and watched the water run, just to remind myself that time was still moving. I didn't go to work. I texted in sick and didn't wait for a reply. I sat at the kitchen table in yesterday's clothes, elbows on the wood, staring at nothing. The light outside was gray again. Everything felt muted, like the world had turned the volume down. I kept thinking about my family, my mom folding laundry at her place, humming to herself, my sister sending me memes and expecting a reply, the casual, unspoken trust between us, the idea that someone else could step into that space, even indirectly, made my stomach twist. Around noon, the message came. Not long, not dramatic, just a reminder that they were still there. It said something like, "I don't want to hurt you. I just want to talk." I felt my jaw clench, my teeth pressed together so hard it hurt. I stood up and started pacing, my step short and uneven. The floor creaked under my feet. My heart was beating fast again, too fast, like it was trying to outrun my thoughts. I realized then that waiting was killing me. Every minute of silence gave my imagination room to get worse. Every vibration of the phone hijacked my body. I couldn't live like this, balanced between dread and hope that maybe it would just stop. So I did the thing I'd been avoiding. I answered. My fingers hovered over the screen for a long time before I typed anything. When I finally did, the words felt clumsy, inadequate. I kept it short, neutral, non-committal. I didn't confirm who I was. I didn't deny it either. As soon as I hit send, my stomach dropped. I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the internet. Like I'd opened a door inside myself and couldn't close it again. The reply came almost immediately. They said they were happy I responded, that they'd been wondering if I'd recognize them too. They mentioned a name, a first name, one that hit me in the chest like a blunt object. I remembered them now. Not clearly, not as a full person. More like a feeling, a presence at the edge of memories, someone older, someone who had watched me more than talked to me, someone I had avoided without knowing why. My skin crawled, like they wrote like they were reminiscing, like this was some shared secret. They talked about how strange it was to see where life had taken me, how confident I seemed now, how proud they felt in a way. That word made my stomach churn. Proud. I sat down hard in the chair and put my head in my hands. My hair fell forward, hiding my face. My shoulders shook once, then again, but no sound came out. My body felt like it was bracing for impact that never arrived. Then the tone shifted. They didn't threaten me outright. They didn't have to. They hinted. They asked questions that felt like tests. They talked about how small the world is, how people from the past run into each other all the time, how families talk. I could feel the pressure building with every message, like someone slowly tightening a vice around my ribs. At one point, I realized my hands were numb. I shook them, flexed my fingers, but the sensation came back slowly, like circulation returning after being cut off. I typed back less and less. Short answers, delays. I tried to slow things down. They noticed. The next message made it clear that this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a negotiation I hadn't agreed to. I felt something inside me crack then. Not shatter. Just a clean break. I stood up and walked to the window. And I looked down at the street, at people moving through their lives without knowing anything about the storm happening inside my apartment. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, faint and distorted. I thought about calling the police. The idea felt both heavy and absurd. What would I say? Someone recognized me. Someone is implying things. Someone knows my childhood nickname. It didn't feel like enough. And part of me was ashamed, even though I knew I shouldn't be. I thought about telling my family. That thought made my chest seize. I imagined my mom's face changing as she tried to reconcile versions of me. I imagined the silence that would follow, the questions, the looks. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my back against it, knees pulled in. The carpet was warm under my legs. I wrapped my arms around myself and rocked slightly without meaning to. I felt small, not like an adult making choices, like a kid again, stuck with a secret too big for their body. Eventually, I made a decision. Not because it felt right, but because it felt like the only thing left. I told them to stop contacting me. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just asked them to leave me alone and said I would involve authorities if they didn't. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down on the floor beside me, like it was something fragile and dangerous. Minutes passed. Then more. No reply? I sat there for a long time, listening to my own breathing slowly return to something closer to normal. My muscles ached from being tense for days. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak, like I'd just run a long distance. The days after that were quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting another message, another reminder, another escalation. Every unknown number made my pulse jump. Every email notification made my shoulders tense, but nothing came. Outwardly, life went on. I went back to work. I answered my family's calls. I smiled when I was supposed to. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Inside, something had changed. I didn't feel anonymous anymore. Even alone in my apartment, I felt observed, like the past had learned how to watch me through the present. I noticed myself pulling my sleeves down, turning my phone face down, avoiding mirrors. I stopped sleeping well. I woke up with my jaw sore from clenching my teeth. Sometimes I'd wake up with my heart racing, convinced I'd missed a message. The worst part wasn't the fear that someone would expose me. It was the loss of separation. The knowledge that the wall I'd built between who I was and who I had been was thinner than I thought. That someone could reach across time and touch both versions of me at once. I never heard from them again, at least not directly. But the damage was already done. I'm still here. My life didn't explode. My family doesn't know. From the outside, everything looks the same. But inside, I carry a constant awareness now, a tension I didn't have before. The understanding that anonymity isn't protection. It's just distance. And distance can collapse in an instant. Sometimes I think about that kid in the photo, the one standing by the fence, squinting into the sun. I wish I could tell her that the past doesn't always stay buried, that some people don't forget you the way you forget them. And that being seen, even accidentally, can change the shape of your life forever.